would literally shoot you in the f***ing head if it meant that they would be able to secure additional electoral wins. Shut the f*** up.
He is such a psycho. Up next, we're going to check in with the left-wing streaming star and political sensation. Mainstream media outlets love him. They give him all these fawning profiles. They talked about whether he would be the Joe Rogan of the left, ignoring the fact that they had Joe Rogan as the Joe Rogan of the left, and then they kind of called him names for questioning anything to the point where he became more right-leaning in many ways. But Hasan Piker, of course, he's just... You got to give him one thing. He knows how to draw attention to himself, knows how to go viral, make sure that people are not ignoring him. But Hasan just had a conversation with one of his friends, Austin, and then Jennifer Welch, who is something of a rising star in progressive commentary, but is a really noxious figure. You'll probably recognize her if you're a regular viewer of this show. We've definitely discussed her in the past, but they talked about the 2028 presidential election, and Hasan made a statement about it that has even the center left like just losing their minds at him, because it's like, what, he doesn't make any sense. And then it has him crashing out in response to their criticism. He basically, the TLDR, I'm about to show you the full clip, suggested that he wouldn't vote for Gavin Newsom over JD Vance in 2028 because Gavin Newsom isn't far left enough. It's the kind of thing that if you're not part of the like left, or even if you are, just strikes you as so bizarre. But anyway, let's watch the clip and then I'll give you my thoughts.
Disappointed in
Who
Gavin
do you vote
Newsom.
for, J.D. Vance or Gavin Newsom?
Well, I'd have to vote for Gavin Newsom,
Me
of course,
too.
100%.
I wouldn't blink.
There's no
What
doubt.
about you, Hasan?
I'd probably vote third party.
You would?
Oh, yeah. I mean, at that point, it doesn't even matter. Like, because my policy on this is the same as, like, my refusal to endorse Kamala Harris. The reason why I did not endorse Kamala Harris was because she did things that were not only unproductive, but also unconscionable. And I still stand on that. I still talk about it all the time because people constantly bring it up. They're like, you didn't sufficiently like promote Kamala Harris. You're the reason why she lost. And I'm like, I am incapable. There is no singular force in this country that is capable of making or breaking an election. And if that was real, then it is the most idiotic thing not to listen to my demands. But everybody knows that that's not real, right? Mm-hmm. If I had this singular force to be able to make Kamala Harris the president, then Kamala Harris should be coming to me every day and being like, let me do a collab with you, please.
Totally.
Right? That's not the case, of course. And they know it. That's why they didn't do it. But the campaigns are always responsible for whether or not they are able to win the crowds, win the population over, and you know, combat against the couch. Not necessarily even against the Republican Party, but usually you're fighting against the couch, people who just don't go out and vote. And for me, the way I see it is if the Democratic establishment makes this decision one more time, just as they did with Hillary Clinton, just as they did with Kamala Harris, and
by the establishment, he means primary voters picking their candidate, I guess. I mean, in the Hillary Clinton example, they had the superdelegates, but I don't think they even do that anymore. So it's not the establishment picking. It would be the voters?
In some ways, just as they did with Joe Biden as well, which led to Trump too. Then they just don't care. And there's not much I can do.
Let me tell you something. I agree with everything you say, but as a person who lived in a red state for 50 years, I would crawl through 10 feet of concrete to vote for Gavin Newsom, even though I think he's duplicitous, a hypocrite, a thirst trap, hungry for power, all of the things that you say, and harms the Democratic Party and sets the psychological soil to be more prey to fascism. All of that I agree with. But there are so many young, queer, black, brown, marginalized people in red states. And even though this corporate Democrat is, you see it in a long term.
God. Sometimes people hear me criticizing the Trump administration and they're like, oh, so you're a Democrat? Now, babe, I could never. Not only do most of my political and policy views still not align at all with the left, like the intra-democratic factions and progressive factions all seem insufferable in different ways. But at least, God, I feel like dirty saying anything positive about Jennifer Welch, but at least her logic is internally consistent. Like, she doesn't want people deported. She wants to abolish ICE. She wants, left-wing ideas about trans issues to be embodied into public policy. So she's like, yeah, I don't like Gavin Newsom, but he's a lot closer to what I want than JD Vance. Yeah, that makes sense. That's internally self-sustaining in a logical thought process. If you start from, I want progressive values, this quite progressive governor is probably a better choice than this Republican guy who's going to be likely the 2028 presidential nominee and has expressed like the explicit opposite of all of these things you say you care about and build your career around. Obviously, Gavin Newsom is in some ways not a far leftist's ideal, like his, not wanting to eradicate the nation state of Israel, or I don't think he's on board with fully abolishing ICE. But what's bizarre is to pretend that Gavin Newsom is some like centrist corporate Democrat, when in reality, he has governed California in a very progressive fashion, pushing all sorts of ultra progressive social ideology into law, and then governing as very progressive economically as well. Maybe he's not ultra far leftist democratic socialist of America 10 out of 10, but that you would be such a political nihilist as to shrug your shoulders when you say you're a progressive and care about progressive values and act like these two choices that are so different are the same. It's just the kind of thing that in a sane world would disqualify someone from ever being taken seriously as a political pundit again. I guess, though, I would argue that when Hasan said Republican senators should be murdered on his stream, or that America deserved 9/11, or openly praised terror groups, those things probably should have been disqualifying as well, and they weren't. He still gets the glossy media profiles How is this guy invited to the DNC when he openly despises and hates Democrats? Which some of his criticisms of them I totally get, but it's why do they welcome someone into their party who is an arsonist and actively wants to destroy it from within, seemingly. At least that's what it seems like to me. Of course, lots of center-left people quickly criticized Hasan on Twitter, and then he responded, crashing out in a truly hilarious way. But first, some tweets about this. A center-left policy analyst, Tyra Hoops, wrote on X about this: insanely irresponsible take, given the harm this administration has unleashed just 1 year in. Yeah, again, this makes sense. Hasan literally claims that ICE is, and I don't fully agree with this, though I have plenty of criticisms of ICE. He's they're terrorists terrorizing communities. And he's Gavin Newsom or JD Vance, I wouldn't vote for either of them. That y'all can see how that makes no sense, right? Even if you don't agree with the underlying premise involved, it just isn't internally a self-sustaining logic at all. Yet this is one of the biggest political influencers in America who millions of people turn to for guidance. That's a problem. I don't know how to explain that that's a problem. Anyway, this is a meme, and obviously I don't agree with the premise, but somebody shared a Lord Farquaad from Shrek, but it's AI to have Hasan's face, and it's a quote: "Some of you may die under JD Vance, but that's a risk I am willing to take," referencing the quote from Lord Farquaad in Shrek. And I don't agree that JD Vance will murder people, but Hasan surely does, and yet also still won't vote against him if it means supporting a Democrat who doesn't match his purity tests. That's ludicrous, actually. Very much ludicrous. Now, a couple people put out tweets trying to defend Hasan here, and I'm not buying what they're selling, personally. But anyway, let's look at this. So, one person wrote, "I actually think it's a good thing to not preemptively swear you'll vote for Gavin Newsom before he's the candidate." That's not what he said. Let me try to give the devil his due here. What a sane left-wing person would say is that, well, I would certainly want to vote for Gavin Newsom, but he would still have to earn my vote by promising to abolish ICE and defund Israel or whatever. I wouldn't just vote for him no matter what, but I would vote for him if he was willing to guarantee me he'd be the lesser of two evils or something. But that's not what Hasan said at all. So your argument doesn't make sense. Anyway, Hasan responded on Twitter to the backlash and wrote, "Shit libs who don't care about losing to Trump now want you to obey in advance to their hypothetical establishment candidate, where there isn't even a guarantee there will be an election 2 years from now, using marginalized people as a cudgel as Gavin threw trans people under the bus. I'm sorry, but I think you have to be out of touch with reality to suggest that the center left or even left, but just not ultra leftist people who are upset with Hasan over these comments don't care about defeating Trump. I think that's almost only what they care about. I don't know what world you're living in, my dude, what reality you are living in. And then are they using marginalized people as a cudgel against you, or are they asking you to make sense? I feel like it's more the latter. And then to claim Gavin Newsom threw trans people under the bus, literally his only evidence for that is that Gavin Newsom engaged in conversations with anti-trans people, like having Charlie Kirk on his podcast and I think Ben Shapiro on his podcast, and that he agreed it's probably unfair to have trans women in women's sports, and that's common sense. Gavin Newsom has stood 10 toes down on every radical trans policy ever in California, from putting biologically male, including violent people, into women's prisons, to minors getting these often irreversible and regardless unsubstantiated medical transitions, and more. He's defended all of it in his state, to the detriment, I think, of his reputation as any sort of moderate person. And yet, just because he dares speak to people like the late Charlie Kirk, may he rest in peace, and others who weren't supportive of trans people, they still view him as an irredeemable traitor. And because he maybe suggested that he would consider some sort of restrictions on trans women and women's sports, they view him as having thrown trans people under the bus. It's just delusional. And you wonder why these people don't pander to you when you're so unreasonable, and frankly, seems like you will always find some way to not support them. If I was being a Democratic politician, would I even try to cater to Hasan and his base of people? No, because I feel like no matter what I do, unless I embrace their exact agenda, which is totally unelectable to the mainstream public, they're never going to support me. So you're essentially consigning yourself to irrelevancy through this constant purity testing. And of course, actual trans activists, solid progressives who are transgender, challenged Hasan on this, and he crashed out in response. Here is Ari Drennan, who is a trans activist who previously worked at Media Matters. Ari wrote on X in response to Hasan, "Actual trans person here. Gavin Newsom made a comment about trans athletes that I don't agree with, but California is still one of the best places to be trans in the country. See the difference? You don't care about what happens to us, so stop acting like you speak for us." Now, I mean, listen, I disagree with Ari on most things, but she's clearly not wrong here. She's clearly making sense and pointing out that Hasan is just a crash out with no logical consistency of any kind, other than what I think will draw him the most attention and let him edgelord. But he responded to Ari's tweet and other pushback by crashing out online and making a truly unhinged suggestion. Listen to this.
You're yelling at one of the few people that does give a fuck about trans people in general, okay? That's all you're doing. Democrats don't give a fuck about you. They would literally shoot you in the fucking head if it meant that they would be able to secure additional electoral wins. Shut the fuck up.
He is such a psycho. How do we pretend that this is normal? To crash out like this and make such insane suggestions. Democrats would not, in fact, literally shoot trans people in the head for a few more votes. In fact, of course, I never want violence against anybody, and he's just taking it to absurd hypotheticals. But Democrats seem unwilling to even compromise on basic, extremely unpopular positions that are radical, like transitioning minors, even as the vast majority of the public is against that. Lots of elected Democrats still lockstep defend that kind of nonsense, even though if they were just politically expedient and they just cared about the polls, they would have totally folded on that issue a long time ago. They're actually not. They actually are ideological on this. They actually are not just going with the polls. So what he's saying doesn't even make sense. I mean, the governor of Kentucky, who is a moderate Democrat, or at least claims to be a moderate Democrat, has still taken some pretty controversial pro-trans kids stances and other things like that. Again, if they were just all about doing what's electorally popular and they don't give a shit about trans people at all, that's not what they would do. I wish they were more responsive to public polling and pressure on these issues, because it would mean that they would end up in a more moderate, sane, compromised position. But that's not the reality. And yet Hasan is screaming and cussing at people who don't belong to his delusional fantasy land where all of this somehow makes sense. I don't know. I find him to be one of the most perplexing figures, because I really don't understand how people are still fans of him, but he still has millions of adoring fans. I get that he's like kind of attractive and can be sometimes entertaining, but beyond that, I mean, this dude makes no sense. He's radical beyond belief, openly violent and dangerous, and then just cusses at and swears at people and crashes out anytime anyone criticizes him, even after he does the most obviously insane things in public that he surely knows are going to make people criticize him. It's all exhausting. But other than that, Hasan Piker is doing amazing, I guess. I don't know, guys. What do y'all think? You're going to have to let me know in the comments below. Make sure subscribed if you aren't yet, and do hit the like button while you're at it to reward my suffering through this legendary Hasan meltdown. But regardless, guys, that'll be it for today's episode of the Brad versus Everyone podcast. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll talk again real soon.